I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'll keep my opening comments relatively brief so we've got some time for questions. I've worked as a professional historian researching and writing on the treaty and other aspects of New Zealand history for more than 30 years, and I strongly oppose the Treaty Principles Bill. It's a bill which, while purporting to define the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi, in fact bears almost next to no relationship to that document. The first principle states that the executive government of New Zealand has full power to govern, and Parliament has full power to make laws in the best interest of everyone, in accordance with the rule of law and the maintenance of a free and democratic society. In 1840, Great Britain was not a democratic society, and the ruling classes were genuinely appalled at the prospect that it ever might.
Really?
Well, that's definitely shown that 1.25 is definitely too fast today.
The British weren't exporting democracy to New Zealand in 1840 because they didn't have it at home to export anywhere. Now, so today a Māori text that is the definitive document under international law, and Article 1 of this doesn't grant the Crown unbridled power to govern all. The kawanatanga at a court of the Crown was instead more limited. As the Waitangi Tribunal concluded in 2014, in February 1840, the rangatira who signed the treaty did not cede their sovereignty, but rather agreed to share power and authority with the governor. The second principle contained in the bill is a willful and egregious attack on Article 2 of the treaty on multiple grounds. It ignores the Tino Rangatira promise to the chiefs and their people in 1840. One party to a treaty cannot unilaterally alter its terms, nor can Māori rights be confined to those conferred through treaty settlements. The kawanatanga secured by the Crown under Article 1 is constrained by the Article 2 promises to recognise and respect the rangatira of Māori communities. The third principle, emphasising the equality of all before the law, bears no relationship to the actual contents of Article 3 of the treaty, which guaranteed all the rights and privileges of British subjects of rangatira Māori and their people. In 1840, the term New Zealanders referred solely to Māori. The context in which the treaty of Waitangi was agreed is also important to remember. In 1840, 80,000 Māori outnumbered and dominated the 2,000 non-Māori resident in these islands, not just demographically, but also militarily, economically and culturally. For a long time, the treaty was viewed by the Crown and non-Māori as at best a historical curiosity rather than a binding and enduring agreement. For the past half century, our country has been immersed in a major process of historical reappraisal. We've had to look at ourselves in the mirror, and what we see reflected back at us has not always been flattering. It's been a difficult, fraught, messy and protracted process, but also an essential one for the future of our country. This bill would put at risk the considerable progress that has been made since the 1970s and needs to be emphatically rejected.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. Short and sharp. Very much appreciated. We've got questions from Ginny Anderson and then time for Paul.
Thank you for your submission and also for your wider contribution in terms of this debate over your time as a historian. We've gone through a number of paths today, but I'm interested on your predictions on where this will go. So there's a lot of misinformation about what the courts do versus what Parliament does, what people really think, what equality is. There's been a lot of things bounced around today, but I'd be really interested for you to take the breadth of your background and make a prediction about where this piece in the timeline, whether that really takes us backwards or not.
Good, thank you. Well, I think a big part of why we're where we are today is because generations of New Zealanders didn't learn our history, or if we did, it was a kind of rose-tinted version, greatest race relations in the world and that kind of thing. And what I've always said to groups when I'm invited to speak to them is we need to be upfront and honest about our history, warts and all. And that's the only way we can mature as a society. In order to do that, we need to have people who have that knowledge of our past. And that's why the decision in 2019 to teach New Zealand history in all schools is incredibly important in the longer term. That's a hugely transformative decision. But I think us adults are we need to catch up on that history as well. Otherwise, there's a kind of void, and that allows misinformation to grow. And, I hope that this bill is quickly put an end to, but that misinformation will linger as long as people don't have that ability to see through it, because they don't have that historical awareness and context.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're going to go to Timothy, then Todd.
Kia ora, Dr. O'Malley. Stoked to have you here because there has been some interesting recollections of history that have come to us today. And I wanted to bring up two just to get a response from you. One of them was Māori did not cede sovereignty because there was no sovereignty to cede from them, if you get what they're trying to say there. And then the other one was, actually, maybe let's start with that one and then I'll find the other one. What's your response to that?
Well, in 1835, the United Tribes of New Zealand signed an agreement called Te Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence of the United Tribes of New Zealand. And in that document, they declared their authority and their sovereignty over the country, which used terms like the kingitanga and the Māori te whenua. And that document was recognised by the British Crown And that's the reason why in 1839, when the British decided that they needed to intervene further in New Zealand, they said, well, we've already recognised Te Whakaputanga as you know, the United Tribes, essentially a sovereign people. So the British acknowledged that at the time. So it's completely wrong today to say that wasn't the case. They did. Otherwise, there would have been no treaty.
And the second one, sorry, real quick, was a KC said to us this morning that Māori were not a sovereign nation because we were warring. What would you say about that?
Has he heard about the 100 Years' War in Europe? Or, you know, Europe in the 19th century was not exactly a peaceful place. Sure, the British Empire was at war most years of the 19th century somewhere around the globe.
Yeah, thank you.
Good answer.
Go to Todd.
Really helpful. Really helpful.
I'm going to go Marty Middle Cup King.
We had another submission this morning actually talking about the ratification of the treaty by the British Crown. You may not have tuned in for that, but this gentleman's contention was basically that the Crown, the Queen at the time, actually only ever ratified the English version. And basically his contention was that at the end of the day, the texts were actually so different that no agreement could actually be reached in practicality. Have you looked at this at all, or got any thoughts on that?
I didn't hear that particular submission, so I probably can't comment on it in too much detail. But I mean, this does go to the essence of the problem, in that the British relied on this English so-called translation, which had no relationship to what Māori had signed up to in 1840. And Māori had entered into a relationship that they assumed was based on reciprocity and partnership and good faith and so on. And the Crown assumed that they had acquired sovereignty over the country. And those two versions of what had been entered into in 1840, it wasn't resolved in 1840. It took decades for the Crown to impose its authority over Māori communities, even into the early 20th century. It's been the raid on Mangapahatu in 1916 has been described as the last shots of the New Zealand Wars. So there's a long history here in terms of the disjunction between, as I say, the so-called English translation and what Māori actually agreed to in 1840.
Thank you. Marty Middle
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koe, Dr. O'Malley. You said warts and all, and talking about this whole, the have to have that knowledge, or that there is a knowledge gap. I mean, you said there was a knowledge gap. In your mind, is it, could it be that simple? Is it that simple an issue that could actually be filled if we fill that knowledge gap? Because it seems so profound that it's that we find ourselves here simply because people just don't know. Can it be that simple?
I think that's a huge part of it. I'm not saying the process of learning is going to be easy, because for some it's deeply uncomfortable.
Yes.
Learning those stories about, you know, what your ancestors may have done in the past. But the thing I always say is the purpose of learning that history is not to make anybody feel guilty or ashamed about the actions of their ancestors. It's to ensure that we can carve out a path ahead for our future. We know where we'll come from. We need that. We need that grounding. We need that identity. And that can only come from being honest with ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Malley. Thank you, folks. That's the time for the submission this afternoon. We appreciate you being with us in person.
That was insightful.
I always welcome the reminder of signed in good faith and things like, we can only speculate as to why, well, there may be more information, but speculate as to why it was not ratified or sorted out at the time.
Well, it probably took, 12 months just to even sit there and have stuff go backwards and forwards. Like, I wouldn't be surprised during the 1840s when we had the Governor General, when they sent off their reports to Queen Victoria, it would have still been like 3, 4, 5 months before Queen Victoria actually received them. That by the time she was getting them, there would have been there would have been 3 or 4 reports behind. You know, and I mean, I do know that's a convention with the Governor General, is that they do tend to make frequent contact with the Crown, or the Crown holder, I should say. Usually, it's officially now by writing it's once every 3 months. But I mean, to be honest, telecommunications have changed. I wouldn't be surprised. I do know during COVID, Queen Elizabeth II actually rang how many world leaders around the world to sit there and ask them how they're going. And what they do, whoa, heck. And that was not normal for the Queen to personally ring heads of state and get the time differences all lined up and all that sort of stuff. But, that's...
Well, the peoples leading up to this event at Waitangi, they'd already gone through enough translation to say, well, so who is your leader, or do you represent your people? Can you speak on behalf of your people? Who am I agreeing with? And yeah, there would have been some understanding of the people there at the time that we will reconvene if necessary.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that one of my social studies teachers mentioned at college. I actually remember he said by the time they went around the country to get the signatures from the different iwi, he said the time it took to do that, they could have actually sailed to England.
Oh, okay.
That was something he did sit there and say. Now, they didn't do that, but they could have done that and nothing would have been necessarily any of the wiser at that point in time. That was, but I mean, at least he was the honest one who used to actually sit there and say, when he had the ones about the was it New Zealand land wars with Waitra, and that's actually where his ancestors came from, which is the same place where Stacey's ancestors on a Māori side come from as well. But it's interesting, you know, like which sides of like hearing the different bits of how each side has gone down their paths.
Mm.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok.